Hello. Oh, cool. If you don't mind, I always like to take a photo of how many people we have at the project updates. Is everyone okay with taking a photo for the Twitters?
Yeah. Woo.
I'm sorry. I'll send you the royalties afterwards. So welcome everyone. This is the OpenStack-Ansible project update. I'm going to be going over what's happened in the past cycle, what do we want to do in the upcoming cycle, and then some question time for us to answer some of the questions. I am here. There's a bunch of other cores that are in the room, and a bunch of longtime contributors and operators are in the room. So, good time to ask questions if you want. So quickly, what is OpenStack-Ansible? OpenStack-Ansible is a tool to allow you to deploy OpenStack using Ansible. As straightforward as that sounds. It's meant for really deployers at the moment. There isn't necessarily like a downstream product of OpenStack-Ansible really. It's mostly just a bunch of operators all working together to build this tool, and that's why it works really well because you get a lot of other operators' knowledge baked right into your deployment. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about what OpenStack has been doing recently, and what are some of the plans for this upcoming cycle, and maybe how you can contribute if there's interesting ways to do that. So again, I just kind of briefly went over this slide in advance, but if you are an upstream developer in OpenStack, you can actually use OpenStack-Ansible to get a small actual environment, dev stack, but maybe a bit more production, more mirroring a real production deployment. And then also if you're an operator and you just want to get an environment up and running. So what's really cool is I actually took this exact slide of what we said we were going to do in Stein from the last project update and just put it here. And so I think it's really cool to just go over the things that we actually ended up doing, the things we didn't have time to do. So updating Ansible and testing Minigen. So we actually use a much more recent Ansible version. And I think we are running like 2.7 point something. So we've actually kept up to date and we haven't had to pin a really old version. So that's been really awesome. We also have worked with the translation team to get translated documents. And so all the infrastructure is ready to place for the documentation to be translated. And I think that we also have a German translation in, and there's some other regions also that have been working on that. So that's really cool. We also had this kind of great Python virtual environment refactor. The way that OpenStack-Ansible deployed before is usually we had a stage where we would build all of the Python wheels or Python packages, let's say, and we would build all of those, and then in deploy time, we would pull down these wheels into the machines that we're installing to. So part of the amazing work effort done by Jesse, and I don't think he's not going to be here until the PTG, but Jesse has kind of headed all of this, and he kind of refactored this entire thing. So now we do this thing, it's kind of like just-in-time building. And so what happens is the packages are actually being built during the deployment stage, and rather than being built in the just pre-preparation stage. But at the same time, the really interesting thing is we didn't lose the value of speeding up our, we're not building every single time, because what happens is we still have that repository server. So on the first build, the wheels are going to be stored on the repo server, and then afterwards on the next deploy on another machine or any other deploys, it will just go and realize that the wheels are already built, and we'll just use these wheels and install from them. So we have kind of shifted the building down into the roles, which also makes it so you can use any of those roles independently. You don't have to actually build the virtual environments before. Now the roles are much more like kind of localized on their own. Oh, yikes. That's not good. Cool. I'll keep moving this every little bit. So that has to do with the repo build. That's why we, kind of the whole refactoring that I just spoke about. We increased the stability for CentOS. CentOS started as a kind of volunteer effort by Major. He was working on that, and he just kind of interesting. When we came in, started using OpenStack-Ansible, we picked it up, and we drove it, and it pretty much has the same feature set as Ubuntu at this point. So if anyone kind of likes to deploy on that. The neat thing also is we also deploy both on distro, what we call distro installs, which means from RPMs, or we do the source installs, which is just building from virtual environments. And you can do either or. They both work for you. So that's really interesting and exciting. And so something that I was actually really excited about and I think has been great success is working with the O team. So we kind of came to this realization is that OpenStack's upstream stuff kind of ran Tempest in its own way. And we ran Tempest in our own way. And O ran Tempest in its own way. And we just realized that, OK, we have Zool in our gates. We all use Ansible in some way or another. Why don't we just all work on the same role? And so there's been awesome contributions from some of the Red Hat team members. I think Arcs and yes, and Shannon, and they've done tremendous work, and they integrated a lot of the stuff that like O uses, like something like Python Tempest conf, which automatically configures Tempest, and added support into that. And now what's really cool is we actually, in OpenStack-Ansible, our OpenStack-Ansible Tempest role gates against O with a full voting job. So we're going to make sure we never break O. And as far as I know, I think O runs some OS Tempest jobs as well, which is really, really cool. And I'm hoping that we can get a lot more of that. There's five jobs. So yeah, that's really exciting. So that was some of the things that happened in Stein. Other things that we added, so that's actually things that we didn't talk about and we ended up doing. We added support for Debian, so now you're able to deploy on Debian Stretch inside OpenStack-Ansible, and we have full CI gate coverage, so every single commit now goes through deployment steps, and we'll deploy against Debian, Ubuntu, and CentOS for every single commit with voting jobs, which is really cool. We also nailed down the upgrade process from Queens to Rocky because of how the effort on our team is. Usually we don't actually ever finalize the upgrade stuff until a bit later in the cycle. We don't support upgrades out of the door from day one. And some of the other things is we did a lot of effort in actually working on some of those upgrade jobs so that we can try and actually run upgrade jobs on every single commit, and hopefully we can finish up that work in this cycle. We also added a few new integrated roles, and when I say integrated roles, I mean like it's full support and you can deploy it out of the box. So we added Mistral, and that was added by our team, and Manila was added by the Rackspace team. With I think Kevin Carter helped a lot with that. We also added this kind of concept of a setup host. So one of the really annoying things that we had to deal with was when we were dealing and deploying against multiple different operating systems, the Python versions were different across operating systems. We couldn't get the same packages everywhere. And so when you run Ansible, you need to have certain dependencies in the like your destination server. So for things like when we're installing, let's say, Nova, and we have to go and use the Ansible module to create a service inside Keystone and create the endpoints, that requires OpenStack SDK to be installed on that remote machine. And the problem is it became so hard to consistently install the right version of OpenStack SDK because CentOS is running a version and there's conflict. So what we did, and a lot of that effort was again by Jesse, is we created this concept of a setup host. And the way that we go about it is the control host, or the host that's doing the deployment, has a local virtual environment that includes all of the dependencies that we need. And for things that actually talk to an API, we have the setup host, which defaults to localhost, and we delegate that to the local host so that anything that's really talking to an API that doesn't really need to run on the remote machine and can run on your local machine will actually happen on that machine. So that helped us a lot in actually leveraging more of the upstream modules and getting rid of the modules that we're dealing with and not having to figure out how to get Python OpenStack SDK and all this other tools and tricky things up and installed. We also refactored a bunch of message queue setup work. Previously, we literally had we have a ton of roles, and the way that we installed the message queues was literally all just manually written. And if someone made a change in one of them, somebody would manually go and update all of that. The OpenStack infrastructure has a tool called the OpenStack infrastructure team has a tool called the proposal bot, and the proposal bot can go ahead and kind of propose patches automatically. And so the way that we went about it is we took advantage of that, and now all the task files that do the message queue setup are actually handled by that. And so hopefully we can do a bit more than that for other things like database, and then from now on, all the common tasks in our roles will all be done the same way. It kind of just helps make the code neater overall and cleaner. We did a bunch of operational improvements. There's a bunch of whole changes, like updating the SSL default configurations to kind of be complying with all the latest security stuff and not running anything that's not very secure by default. And there's a lot of kind of reliability changes. Again, as we're all operators running it, we all kind of run into OpenStack issues, and we're like, hey, this should probably be upstream, and this is the same configuration value that we'd like to have in there. So train, what we want to do for the upcoming cycle. And this is a lot of the stuff that we're going to be talking during the PTG. So we want to add upgrade jobs. We want to be able to run upgrades on every single commit. With the speedups that we do and the ability to deploy on bare metal right now, it's probably possible for us to do a full deployment and then an upgrade within probably 2 hours. And that seems like it would fit the upstream OpenStack infra timeouts. Usually they don't like us going more than 3 hours, and the jobs are not fun to go over 3 hours. We want to continue our work to integrate with Mitagen. Mitagen is a tool that replaces kind of the internal Ansible runner and does a lot of speed ups by creating a process that runs inside the server and just kind of doing this RPC back and forth rather than spawning Python on every single time that you want to run a module. So it speeds up a lot. But because of our heavy usage of Ansible, there's a lot of corner cases that we kind of run into. However, the developer behind it has been extremely supportive and excited about our usage of OpenStack-Ansible. So they've been pushing in patches to address our needs, and hopefully we can push through that and get it done. We also want to kind of like reimagine our roles. Our roles have kind of started off being inside all a huge monorepo and got split out. But with time, we started accumulating a lot of variables. And what's really nice is we really do want to give that ability to give our users to tweak as much as we can. But we also have this function called overrides where you can override any configuration value that you need inside. So we're kind of reaching a point where it's like, do we really need all these extra variables, or can an operator just go ahead and override whatever they need to overwrite rather than giving all these little tunables? So hopefully we're looking into that to kind of optimize the roles and making them faster, and a bunch of other things to how to kind of make the roles more consumable. If somebody just wants to use a role to install, let's say, Magnum, and has their own OpenStack deployment in another way, so they can just do that. We also need to integrate OpenStack placement in this cycle. As far as I understand it, they're looking to remove the code from Nova sometime this week, which means that we'll be completely broken until that gets fixed. So we want to get OpenStack placement integrated, and that goes with the upgrade jobs, because with the placement extraction, there's a whole bunch of stuff that we have to do about migrating the database information from the Nova database onto the new placement one. Using pre-built wheels by default is something that we've discussed. Now that the OpenStack infrastructure team builds wheels for all of the projects and pushes them to PyP, we want to maybe look into deploying directly from those wheels rather than building them in that process. And that will probably speed up the deployment process, but still giving the ability for our users to say, I want to install this Git commit, and doing that. We also want to work on improving the bare metal support. There is kind of a few finicky things that have to be done for bare metal for it to work. And we are actually considering changing the default architecture to be bare metal #1 and containerized #2. So we're not taking any of those, but we just feel like it's a much simpler use case when someone just comes in, gives 3 control nodes, a bunch of compute nodes, and gets only that rather than ending up with 40 containers and a whole bunch of complex network infrastructure that you have to apply. We also want to get Python 3 supported. So right now, with the work that we did with the virtual env stuff, it really is almost like a matter of flipping a switch. We are waiting for CentOS 8 to come out. So whenever Red Hat employees can start counting to 8, we can do that. And obviously, we want to keep up with the latest release of Ceph. So right now, I believe that we're running Mimic at this point, but we want to kind of keep it up to date. So just for a heads up, we don't actually maintain any of our own Ceph deployment code. We use Ceph Ansible, and we just call that through OpenStack-Ansible, because Ceph Ansible is really good at what it does, and we're good at what we do, so we don't want to do that. So how to give feedback? So yeah, come talk to us. We're all really very open and fun to talk to. There's going to be an onboarding session that's hosted here earlier. I know some of the cords are going to be there, and we're going to be talking about what to expect, how to be more involved, and talk a bit more about the architecture and really how do we do our testing, what goes on. We're on OpenStack-Ansible on Freenode. You can email anytime to the discuss mailing list now with the OpenStack-Ansible tag. And also, we'll be at the PTG all week. So I should have probably put a link for the Etherpad there, but if you go to the Etherpad's wiki page, you'll find that the OpenStack-Ansible one is listed there. And yeah, how to contribute, we'll have that project onboarding session. Yeah, that's the real one. I may have used the slides from the last time. That's where you want to be at 250. Let's just ignore that next slide. And that's it. I'm not sure how we are on time. I will look at the back and they'll tell me how we're doing on time. 4 minutes? Sure. So we have some questions for 4 minutes if anyone wants to ask anything or have any questions about what we're doing with OpenStack-Ansible or suggestions, feedbacks, complaints. Sure.
Just curious about the DRBT.
Yeah.
Is from OpenStack-Ansible plans to support DRBTs someday?
So DRBD, like the mirrored block storage system?
Block device?
Is there a Cinder driver for that?
Yes.
Yeah, so in that case, it should be pretty straightforward because we allow you to configure whatever Cinder driver you want. So all you have to do is do that. However, I don't think it's an OpenStack-Ansible scope to deploy DRBD for you and then integrate it. I think Ceph is the only one that we do, and there's also been talks about like, should we really be installing Ceph for people, or should people install their own Ceph and just provide us with the information? With DRBD or Ceph? Ceph, yeah. Ceph right now, like you can literally say, these are my monitors, these are my OSDs, and it will just deploy the whole thing for you. And it can even deploy RADOS gateway with the Swift support. So if you want to use all of that. Yes, we also support an external Ceph. So if you just want to say, here's my cluster ID, here's my monitors, go ahead. And we have a really cool Ceph client role where it will actually go out, talk to your monitors, and get a key for like a CephX key and deploy that all automatically. Any other questions? Sure.
Do you guys have anything Etherpad about your upgrade plans?
So we should be discussing what we want to do with upgrades. So that's something that will be there. We'll talk about it. I need to lock down the exact agenda and the timing of what we're gonna do and when. But yeah, that should be there. That's something that we want to do. Yeah, the upgrade jobs actually exist, and we run them as periodics, but we want to move to running them as like check and gate. So it's just a matter of just like babysitting these jobs and getting them to not break all the time. Any other questions? Cool. Well, thank you so much, everyone. For those that will be at PTG, we'll see you again, and enjoy the rest of your summit.